job. There are times when you will come in contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials that can make you ill. That's why it's important that you not only learn to recognize these situations, but you also learn how to protect yourself and others from becoming infected. This training discusses how infections occur, the bloodborne diseases that cause concern, how bloodborne pathogens are spread, and how to protect yourself from disease transmission. Prevention includes practicing personal hygiene, using personal protective equipment, and following engineering and work practice control. Remember, the better informed you are about infectious diseases, the less likely you are to contract or transmit them. Before discussing types of infectious diseases, we should first consider how infections occur. Any disease that can be passed from person to person, from animal, or insect, is considered infectious. The disease process begins when the disease-causing pathogen, or germ, enters the body. Generally, the skin and mucous membranes of the eyes, nose, and mouth do an effective job of keeping pathogens from entering the body. However, if the barriers fail and a pathogen enters the body's immune system begins working to fight the disease. Once inside the body, certain pathogens can overwhelm the immune system, causing a serious infection. Left untreated, certain infections can be deadly. The two most common types of pathogens are bacteria and viruses. Bacteria surround us every day, but these one-celled microorganisms do not depend on other organisms for life. They can live outside the body. Once inside the body, however, certain bacteria can cause diseases such as strep throat and illness. Bacterial infections may be relatively simple to treat if caught early. Antibiotics are often prescribed to help eliminate conditions caused by bacteria. Viruses, on the other hand, depend on other organisms to live and reproduce. Typically, most viral infections are difficult to treat with medication. Viruses can be carried in the blood or in other body fluids. Bacteria and viruses that are carried in the blood are called bloodborne pathogens. Based on the OSHA bloodborne pathogens standard, your employer has determined that you may have occupational exposure to blood or other potentially infectious materials. This means that while performing your job duties, it is anticipated that you may come in contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials. The bloodborne pathogens of primary concern are the hepatitis B virus, hepatitis C virus, and human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. The hepatitis B virus, or HBV, causes hepatitis B, a serious liver infection. Hepatitis B may be severe or even fatal. There are some medications available to treat chronic hepatitis B infection. However, these medications do not work for everyone. Hepatitis C is a liver disease caused by the hepatitis C virus. Formerly called non-A, non-B hepatitis, hepatitis C is the most common chronic bloodborne infection in the United States. AIDS is caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV. HIV attacks white blood cells and destroys the body's ability to fight infection. People infected with HIV may not feel or look sick. They may not even know they have the disease. The fortunate feature of all these diseases is that they are preventable. One of the best ways to protect yourself is to understand the conditions that are necessary for a bloodborne disease to be spread. First, a pathogen must be present. Second, it must be sufficient in quantity to cause disease. Third, the pathogen must enter the body through a correct entry site. And finally, A person must be susceptible to the pathogen. If any of these conditions are missing, infection does not occur. The bloodborne pathogens, hepatitis B and C viruses, and HIV, can be spread from person to person through direct or indirect contact with infected blood or other body fluids. These pathogens are not spread by sneezing, coughing, through food or water, or by casual contact such as hugging or shaking hands. Most on-the-job exposure to bloodborne pathogens is through direct contact. Direct contact transmission occurs when infected blood or body fluids from one person enters another person's body at a correct entry site. Blood splashing in the eye is an example of direct contact. Bloodborne pathogens are also transmitted by indirect contact. Indirect contact transmission occurs when a person touches an object that contains the infected blood or other body fluid, and that infected blood or body fluid enters the body through a correct entry site. Protecting yourself from disease transmission requires that you modify your behavior and follow some basic practices. These include practicing good personal hygiene and using appropriate personal protective equipment. It also includes those practices your employer may require you to follow. Your personal hygiene is an important part of preventing infection. Washing your hands is an effective way to help keep you from getting sick. By washing your hands frequently, you wash away many disease-causing germs that you might have picked up from other people or from contaminated objects. Wet your hands with water and apply liquid soap. Rub your hands vigorously for at least 15 seconds, covering all surfaces of the hands and fingers. Then rinse your hands with water and dry your hands thoroughly with a paper towel. Turn off the faucet using the paper towel. If soap and water are not available, use a commercial antibacterial product such as an alcohol-based hand rub. However, if you use this type of product, you must wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Immunizations are an important part of maintaining your personal health, both on and off the job. OSHA requires employers to make the hepatitis B vaccine available free of charge to all employees who have the potential for on-the-job exposure. Furthermore, should an exposure occur, employers are required to provide post-exposure evaluation and follow-up. Appropriate protective equipment could be used whenever exposure to blood or other potentially infectious materials is likely. This equipment includes disposable gloves, gowns, eyewear, masks and shields, resuscitation devices, and breathing barriers. All are designed to prevent you from making contact with infectious materials, which can greatly decrease your risk of contracting or transmitting a disease. But it's not enough to have these devices available. You must know how to use them. Disposable gloves in latex, nitrile, or vinyl should always be worn when there is a possibility you could contact blood or other potentially infectious materials, directly or indirectly. Wearing gloves minimizes the exposure to blood and other potentially infectious materials. In general, jewelry should not be worn where the potential for risk of exposure exists. When removing gloves, partially remove the first glove by pinching the glove at the wrist, being careful to touch only the glove's outside surface. Pull the glove toward the fingertips without completely removing it. The glove is now inside out. Remove the second glove by pinching the exterior of the second glove with the partially gloved hand. Then fold the second glove toward the fingertips until it is inside out. Then remove it completely. Finish removing both gloves by grasping both gloves with your free hand. Touch only the clean interior surface of the glove. After removing both gloves, discard them in an appropriate container and wash your hands thoroughly. Here is another acceptable method of removing gloves. Remember, the objective is to remove them without touching the outside of either glove. Never handle personal items such as pens or combs when wearing soiled gloves. Breathing barriers include a variety of resuscitation masks and face shields. These devices are placed between you and the victim's mouth and nose to prevent you from making direct contact with body fluids. You should know how to use any devices made available to you. Always change masks between contact with different people. Now that you know what you can do to protect yourself, let's talk about what your employer can do. Your employer is responsible for implementing engineering and work practice controls as part of the exposure control plan. Engineering controls are physical devices that isolate or remove a hazard from a workplace. Examples include sharps disposal containers, self-sheathing needles, and safer devices such as sharps with engineered sharps injury protections or needleless systems. Work practice controls alter behavior. For instance, in certain situations, your employer may require you to wear protective equipment, such as gloves. Changing the way sharp objects, such as needles, are handled can prevent needle stick injuries. Together, engineering and work practice controls greatly reduce your exposure to infectious hazards. Proper handling, cleaning, and disinfecting of soiled equipment, supplies, and other materials is important in preventing disease transmission. It combines both work practice and engineering controls. Sometimes an incident may result in a spill of blood or body fluid. Your first step in dealing with a spill is containment. Commercially available containment units designed for hazardous materials are very effective. Any absorbent materials can be used if they are disposed of properly. To manage a spill, follow these steps. Always wear single-use disposable gloves and other protective equipment when cleaning up spills. Clean up spills immediately or as soon as possible. If the spill is mixed with sharp objects, such as broken glass and needles, do not pick up these items with your hands. Use tongs, a broom and dustpan, or 2 pieces of cardboard. Use absorbent materials to clean up the spill and dispose of the materials in a labeled biohazard container. Flood the area with a disinfectant solution and allow it to stand for at least 10 minutes. A recommended disinfectant solution is a fresh mixture of 1 part bleach to 10 parts water. Use paper towels to absorb the solution and put the paper towels in the biohazard container. Review the exposure control plan with your employer for equipment and procedures specific to your facility. The OSHA standard also requires that the work area be kept clean and sanitary to help prevent exposure to bloodborne pathogens. Specific procedures for cleaning and disinfecting equipment in your workplace should be outlined in the exposure control plan. Handle all soiled supplies, equipment, and other materials with care until they are properly cleaned and disinfected. Place all used disposable items in labeled containers. Place all soiled clothing in marked plastic bags for disposal or washing. Scrub soiled boots, leather shoes, and other leather goods such as belts with soap, a brush, and hot water. If you wear a uniform to work, wash and dry it according to the manufacturer's instructions. Floors, decks, countertops, and ambulance and automobile seats must be cleaned before using a disinfectant solution. Exposure incidents involve contact with blood or other potentially infectious materials through a needle stick, broken or scraped skin, or the mucous membranes of the eyes, nose, or mouth. If you have an exposure incident, wash needle stick injuries, cuts, or exposed skin with soap and water. Flush splashes of blood or other potentially infectious materials to the nose and mouth with water. Irrigate eyes with clean water, saline, or sterile irrigants. Following any exposure incident, you should immediately report the exposure incident to your supervisor and follow the steps in the exposure control plan for confidential medical evaluation and follow-up. Employers must maintain a sharps injury log for the recording of injuries from contaminated sharps. The log must maintain employee privacy, list the type and brand of the device involved in the incident, include the location of the incident and description of the incident. This training is only a part of an overall exposure control plan. This plan is an important step in eliminating or minimizing employee exposure to blood or other potentially infectious materials. Minor changes can make a major difference in minimizing occupational hazards that may jeopardize your health. Remember, by practicing good personal hygiene, using personal protective equipment, and following engineering and work practice controls, you will take a big step towards safeguarding yourself and others against disease transmission.